First topic, write about the theme of character transformation, or how some characters change from worse to better, okay, not the other way around, in As You Like It, okay? Shakespeare even uses, I don't know why I have the word even there, Shakespeare uses biblical imagery and language, the new Adam, Reformation, etc., to discuss or introduce or whatever these changes. Why do you think Shakespeare is interested in this theme? To what effect does he put this theme in the play? That is, how does it relate to the overall meaning of the play? So, include 4 substantive quotations, 10 to 30 words from the play. You might wonder, okay, why do I put word number down? Because over the last several years, I think I talked about this in the class with you before, I've had students include a single word as a quotation from a play. And it's not been it's been like king. So, 10 to 30 words for each of those quotations, okay? Second one, how does Shakespeare use the settings of his plays to influence and affect the characters within the plays, and to direct or influence our understanding of the meaning of the plays? Include 2 substantive quotations from each play. Notice from each play, that implies you're writing about both Midsummer Night's Dream and As You Like It, okay? Discuss the theme of illusion in the plays. Again, the plays, 2 plays. I'm not sure about the grammar of that one. Not seeing correctly or not seeing things as they really are, influence the meaning, meaning your understanding. I'm not suggesting that the meaning is somehow floating around and is an independent, objective meaning, okay, of each play. 2 substantive, again, quotations from each play. 4, discuss Shakespeare's use of the trope of mistaken identities and or disguise. Notice they're not necessarily the same thing. So you can do either of those, okay, in these comedies, and why does he use them? That was 4. 5, what do the comedies say about the relationship of reason and romantic love? Discuss both plays, and again, 2 substantive quotations. 6, discuss the theme of A Midsummer Night's Dream. So you have one just on As You Like It. Here you have one just on Midsummer Night's Dream. How does the title relate to the theme? How does the play within the play of Pyramus and Thisbe relate to the theme? Does the dream idea, let's say, relate to Plato's allegory of the cave in any way? How does it Theseus' speech at the beginning of Act 5 tie in? Notice, I'm not suggesting that the allegory of the cave is suggestive. I talked about it on the board. I'm not suggesting that Theseus' speech at the beginning of Act 5 does tie in. I'm just asking, does it? And if it does, how does it? Okay? 4 substantive quotations from Midsummer Night's Dream. 7, discuss the theme of order/hierarchy, maybe but not necessarily tying it to disorder and anarchy in the plays, and relate that to the great chain of being. What happens when the order of things is disrupted in the plays? The order of things, the hierarchy, okay? How is that order made right in the plays? Oh, and by the way, this idea, it's not just in the comedies. Read Shakespeare's Troilus and Cressida, and the character Ulysses delivers one of the great speeches about the chain of being without using that term, chain of being. So it's in a lot of Shakespeare's plays. It's in Henry IV parts 1 and 2 also. What happens when the order of things is disrupted? How is that order made right in the plays? Okay, that question obviously presupposes what? That it is made right. Why?
Because it is in comedies.
Because they're comedies. We have the restoration of society, okay? Discuss both plays and include 2 substantive quotes, okay? Last one. Apply this quotation to the plays. The course of true love never did run smooth. Okay? Where do we, or do we, trying questioning that, where do we see that in these plays? What might Shakespeare be suggesting about real love in the real world as opposed to idealized love in fiction, poetry, romances? And a really good question for like the end of the semester, I won't do this because I don't do a comprehensive exam. A really good question would be to look at that idea across not just the plays, but include the poetry also. It is an issue Shakespeare wrestles with in the plays, the poetry, and the sonnets. Okay? So it's important to him. Why? Not sure. Some people would suggest biography is important there. Okay? So discuss both plays, include 2 substantive quotations. So down here, when I say, the beginning of your page should look like this, remember, this should all be double spaced. All right? There's no single spacing at all, anywhere. Okay? Make sure you indicate which topic you are writing about. Okay? Like I have it here. And that reason, I don't know why that happened. The reason in love, the title that I've given down here, that should be centered. I don't know why it's centered on my computer. For some reason, it did not center in the printer. Okay. Hopefully those are clear. I almost threw in a come up with your own question and write that, okay? But I didn't. Maybe on the next one. All right, we left off.
Beginning of Act 1, Scene 3.
That's what I thought. I don't have a note, but I had it open to that page. Act 1, Scene 3. So, where we left off, or we finished with, let me pause for just 1 second and make one comment about A Midsummer Night's Dream. How many lovers are there in A Midsummer Night's Dream?
Too many.
Or pairs of lovers?
3.
We start with Theseus and Hippolyta. That's 1. Lysander and Hermia. Right? That's 2. Helena and Demetrius. That's 3.
Demetrius and Hermia, technically.
Yeah, but they're not really lovers because she doesn't love him. Yeah, we started with them.
Oberon and Titania.
Oberon and Titania.
Titania and Bottom.
And there's 1, yeah, but that's false. I mean real love. Well, kind of. There's 1 more. Play within the play. Pyramus and Thisbe. Okay. So that theme that's in that 1 question, there's a lot to work with. A lot of material there. Okay. So we left off on Henry IV, part 1, with the character of Prince Hal, also sometimes called Prince Harry, and often just called Hal when he's being talked to by Falstaff, telling us what? When he says I know you all and will a while uphold the unyoked humor of your idleness, in the rest of that soliloquy, he's revealing himself to us. And he's telling us, I'm going to play along with this group, Falstaff, Peto, Bardolph, etc. Okay, Pawns, etc. And he's doing that for a reason. What's the reason?
The smoke screen.
It's a perfect example, perfect analogy. So that when the smoke clears away, Hal will appear? It's hard to say.
Fantastic.
Bright, shining sun. Okay? How were we introduced to Hal?
Debauchery.
Okay. How were we verbally introduced to Hal?
His father slandering him.
Bingo. The first thing we hear about the prince is what Henry IV says about him. And what's he say? Oh, if only my son were Hotspur. who is the, as he put it, the theme of honor's tongue. Juxtaposing that with Hal, who obviously is not the theme of honor's tongue. He's the theme of dishonor's tongue, of ignominity's tongue. Okay? So, king comes in, Act 1, Scene 3, with Northumberland, Worcester, Hotspur, Blunt, and others. Okay? Northumberland, Worcester, Hotspur, Blunt, these are all what? They're on the opposing side. Okay? The king said, the last time we saw him, that he has commanded Hotspur to come and answer as to why he is not delivering his prisoners to him, to the king. The king, my blood hath been too cold and temperate, unapt to stir at these indignities. Excuse me. And you have found me, for accordingly you tread upon my patience. What does that mean? It's a little low. It means don't push. I've had it. But be sure, I will from henceforth rather be myself, mighty and to be feared, than my condition which hath been smooth as oil, soft as young down, and therefore lost that title of respect which the proud soul ne'er pays, but to the proud. So he says, my blood has been too cold and too temperate. What's he mean by cold? Well, what's the opposite? What's hot-blooded? Angry, furious, okay? Responding to little instances of, let's say, insubordination and such. So he says, I've kept myself under wraps. Now, he's saying, not anymore. Now I'm not going to be like smooth as oil and soft as down. So if he's not going to be soft as down, he's going to be hard as steel. You've roused a mighty giant. Worcester, our house, my sovereign liege, little deserves the scourge of greatness to be used on it. Don't talk to us like that, is what Worcester is saying. In that same greatness too, which our own hands have helped to make so portly. What has Worcester just reminded the king of? It's reminded the king. Has it reminded you? Because you didn't read Richard II.
We put you on the throne.
Bingo. If it weren't for us, you wouldn't be king. But notice his last word. Portly. What's portly mean? Fat. Okay? He doesn't mean the king is literally fat. He means you've grown too big for your britches. All right? Northumberland, my lord, king. Worcester, get thee gone. Why do we get that little 2 words from Northumberland?
He's trying to diffuse the situation.
Northumberland realizes Worcester has gone too far. He's challenged the king. Worcester, get thee gone, for I do see danger and disobedience in thine eye. In other words, I see treason. There could be a reason for that. Okay? The reason could be, look in your own eye first, you know. Oh, sir, your presence is too bold and peremptory, and majesty might never yet endure the moody frontier of a servant brow. What's the moody frontier? It's this. It's the face of a servant. Get down on your knees. He's not saying literally, but that's kind of what a servant ought to do in the presence of a king. You have good leave to leave us. Now, when we need your use and counsel, we shall send for you. In other words, when I require something from you, I'll jerk your leash. You were about to speak, he then says to Northumberland. Yea, my good lord, those prisoners in your highness' name demanded, which Harry Percy here at Holmdon took. Remember, Harry Percy is Northumberland's son. They're both named Harry. Short form of Henry. I don't understand why it's a short form, but anyways. Which Harry Percy here at Holmdon took, were, as he says, not with such strength denied as is delivered to your majesty. Either envy, therefore, or misprision is guilty of this fault, and not my son. He's essentially saying he's not denying you the prisoners. You've mistook his intentions. So, Hotspur. We hear Hotspur for the first time. My liege, I did deny no prisoners. Well, that's nice, short, straight to the point. But I remember when when the fight was done, when I was dry with rage and extreme toil, breathless and faint, leaning upon my sword. So he means right after the battle ended and the sweat on me dried and the blood dried and I was out of breath and I was leaning literally on his sword. What? Came there a certain lord, neat and trimly dressed, fresh as a bridegroom, and his chin new reaped, showed like a stubble land at harvest home. He was perfumed like a milliner, and twixt his finger and his thumb he held a pouncet box, which ever and anon he gave his nose and took it away again. He's dipping his fingers in snuff and going, why? What smells bad? The battlefield. Who therewith angry, when it next came there, took it in snuff until still, that is always, he smiled and talked, and as the soldiers bore dead bodies by, he called to them, either the dead bodies or the soldiers carrying them, or possibly both, he called them untaught knaves, unmannerly, to bring a slovenly, unhandsome corpse betwixt the wind and his nobility. So he's talking about the soldiers carrying the dead away, who came downwind of where the prince, the Lord, is standing, so that when the wind blows, he smells the stench of rotting corpses. That's why he calls them knaves and unmannerly. They should have the good sense to march around so that he doesn't have to be olfactorily offended. With many holiday and lady terms he questioned me, amongst the rest he demanded my prisoners in your majesty's behalf. So what is Hotspur telling us?
You sent the wrong man to ask me to give me your prisoner.
Okay, true, or possibly true. What else? My lord, think of the circumstances when this guy showed up. How many Scots died? 10,000 in 22. This was not a little skirmish. This was a major battle. I then, all smarting with my wounds being cold, to be so pestered with a popinjay, what later would be called a fop. This is the guy walking around with the fancy suit and the nice, pocket shirt, handkerchief in the pocket, and dressed beautifully in the hair slicked back and all that. Out of my grief and my impatience, answered neglectingly, I know not what. He should or he should not. He's saying, I don't even know what I said to him. For he made me mad to see him shine so brisk and smell so sweet, and talk so like a waiting gentlewoman of guns and drums and wounds. God save the mark. In telling me the sovereignest thing on earth was parmacety for an inward bruise, and that it was a great pity, so it was. This villainous saltpeter should be digged out of the bowels of the harmless earth, which many a good tall fellow had destroyed so cowardly, but for these vile guns, he would himself have been a soldier. This lord said to Hotspur, if we fought the way we fought in the good old days, with swords and not with guns, where there is honor and glory in hand-to-hand combat. He said, I would have been in the front of this rank. Yeah. Hotspur's like, buddy. This bald, unjointed chat of his, my lord, I answered indirectly as I said. I mean, I don't know what I said to him. And I beseech you, let not his report come current for an accusation betwixt my love and your high majesty. So that's a pretty good sucking up speech, right? Think of the heat of the moment. Okay? Blunt. The circumstance considered, good my lord, where Lord Harry Percy then had said to such a person in such a place at such a time with all the rest, may reasonably die. Reasonably. A reasonable person would look at that circumstance and say, it's cool. Don't worry about it. And never rise to do him wrong or any way impeach what then he said, so he unsay it now. And notice, Hotspur did just then, in that long wordy speech, unsay whatever it was I said before in the heat of the moment. He's essentially recanted because of the circumstance. And Blunt is saying, take him at his word. King, why yet he doth deny his prisoners. What's the yet mean? To this moment. But with proviso and exception, that we at our own charge shall ransom straight his brother-in-law, the foolish Mortimer, who on my soul hath willfully betrayed the lives of those that he did lead to fight against that great magician damned Glendower, whose daughter, as we hear, that Earl of March hath lately married. Does he literally deny the prisoners? No, my Lord King, you cannot have them. No, he doesn't do that. He does it via provision and exception. Unless you do XYZ, then, or if you do XYZ, then you can have my prisoners. What's the king's take on that? Yeah, there's no if with me. I'm the king. I told you to do something, you do it, period. And what is it he wants done? He wants the king to ransom Mortimer, who we find out married the daughter of Glendower. By marrying the daughter of Glendower, what has he done? I kind of alluded to this the other day.
He's allying himself with an enemy nation.
He's allying himself with Glendower. But just by the act of that marriage, he makes himself the king's enemy. Okay? Shall our coffers then be emptied to, notice, redeem a traitor home? Should we take money out of the royal treasury, out of the country's treasury, to redeem a traitor? Shall we buy treason and indent with fears when they have lost and forfeited themselves? It was his own stupidity that got him captured, Henry is saying. Now, on the barren mountains, let him starve. And that's alluding to, I think, the old practice of discarding children on mountains to die. He's saying, let this boy, he's not a boy, he's a grown man, but let him die as a result of his own actions. For I shall never hold that man, my friend, whose tongue shall ask me for 1 penny cost to ransom home, revolted Mortimer. And he means Mortimer in revolt against me. He doesn't mean I am revolted by Mortimer. So what has he just said? You want me to ransom Mortimer? I consider Mortimer treasonous and a traitor. No. Anyone who asks for me to ransom Mortimer is what? Not my friend. And with in Shakespeare's history of the plays, there's not a lot of neutrality. Either you're the friend of the king or you're the enemy of the king. Okay? Hotspur. And this is where Hotspur shows his inner self, not via soliloquy. Okay? Revolted Mortimer? He never did fall off, my sovereign liege, but by the chance of war. To prove that true needs no more but one tongue for all those wounds, all those mouthed wounds. He's talking about the wounds Mortimer took in his body, which valiantly he took when on the gentle Severn sedgy bank, in single opposition hand to hand, he did confront the best part of an hour in changing hardiment with great Glendower. In other words, he fought in single combat with Glendower. 3 times they breathed, 3 times did they drink. This is a motif you see in kind of battle history. In the Old English epic poem Beowulf, Beowulf fights 3 times with the dragon, and each time there's a break. In Edmund Spenser's The Fairy Queen, the Red Cross Knight, fights 3 times with an ogre, and each time he falls back, drinks, and then goes back to the battle. Sir Gawain of the Green Knight, he's got 3 challenges, etc. So, he goes on and says, 3 times did they drink upon agreement of swift Severn's flood, who then affrighted with their bloody looks ran fearfully among the trembling reeds. Blood stained with these valiant combatants. Never did bare and rotten policy color her working with such deadly wounds. Bare and rotten policy. You've got a gloss down there. Paltry policy, cunning, deceitful actions. Okay? Nor never could the noble Mortimer receive so many and all willingly, then let not him be slandered with revolt. Because who is Hotspur suggesting Mortimer received? On whose behalf did Mortimer receive those wounds? The king's. King, thou dost belie him, Percy. Thou dost belie him. He never did encounter with Glendower. Okay, so here we have a problem. Percy, Harry Hotspur, is saying Mortimer received all kinds of wounds from this battle with Glendower. The king says he never fought him. Somebody's got to be wrong. Somebody's not telling the truth. I tell thee, he durst as well have met the devil alone as Owen Glendower for an enemy. Art thou not ashamed? Why? Because he's suggesting Hotspur's lying. Or Hotspur has been lied to and bought the lie. But sir, henceforth don't speak about Mortimer. I don't want to hear his name. Send me your prisoners with the speediest means, or you shall hear in such a kind from me as will displease you, or suffer the consequences. My Lord Northumberland, we license your departure with your son. Notice how long it takes to say that. What does he mean? You have leave to go. Now, be gone. Send us your prisoners, or you will hear of it. The king, with Blunt and his other men, leave. Okay? Remember, it was Blunt who came and told the king about Hotspur's great victory over the Douglas and the Scots and such. Hotspur, and if the devil come and roar for them, I will not send them. Complication, conflict, and such. I will after straight and tell him so, for I will ease my heart. I'm going to go after the king and tell him that. Why? Because it'll make me feel better. Hotspur. What's the name mean? Hot-headed. Why the spur part?
Quick to anger.
Okay, that spurs are what you use to make a horse move. This is a hot one, like a red hot piece of metal. Comes into contact, it makes whoever comes into contact with it jump. Okay? He spurs others on to action. He's spurring himself, obviously, also. And then Northumberland, drunk with choler. Choler is that humor that has to do with anger. Stay and pause a while. Here comes your uncle. So Worcester comes in. Hotspur. Speak of Mortimer? Zounds. What's zounds? By God's wounds is what that literally means. So you're swearing by the dead, wounded body of Christ. That's a pretty powerful exclamation. I will speak of him and let my soul want mercy if I do not join with them. Ooh, what's he just done if the king had heard that? He's joined with the traitor. Yea, on his part I'll empty all these veins, that is, I'll bleed to death, and shed my dear blood drop by drop, blah, 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 blah. Okay? Northumberland, brother, the king hath made your nephew mad. Worcester is the brother of Northumberland. Okay? Hotspur is the nephew of Worcester. Who struck this heat up after I was gone? Who struck the heat, like hitting flint to steel? Who ignited the flame? And notice what Hotspur's doing. He's still going on about the prisoners. Why? He's worked up, and he's like a dog with a bone. Once he gets on that theme of whatever it is, he doesn't let go. Okay? And when I urge a ransom again on my wife's brother, then I'll do it. Worcester, I can't blame him. Was not he proclaimed by Richard that dead is the next of blood? The he is not Hotspur. Who's the he that Worcester's talking about? Mortimer. What Worcester has just said is that Mortimer should have been next in line to the throne, not Henry Bolingbroke. Henry Bolingbroke usurped the throne. Okay? Northumberland, he was. I heard the proclamation. And then it was when the unhappy king, whose wrongs in us God pardon. What does he mean? Whose wrongs in us? Our wronging of him, God pardon. See, when in Richard II, when Henry Bolingbroke returned from banishment, first one he sought out was Northumberland. Northumberland is one of the largest counties in England. It was in the Middle Ages a military might. Northumberland covers it. Shut up, Siri. It had huge military reserves, let's say, because of the size of property. So the Earl of Northumberland is a hugely powerful person. Bolingbroke aligns with him, and because of Northumberland's connections to Worcester, etc., they all gang up against Richard. Not initially at the first to depose him, by the way, in Richard II. So, it was then that the unhappy king did set forth upon his Irish expedition. See, when Richard II, when Henry comes back to England from his banishment, Richard has launched an expedition against Ireland. Okay, the Irish and the English have hated each other for literally 1,000 years, because the English always tried to conquer Ireland, which is why Northern Ireland is still such an anachronism, so to speak, to Ireland itself, okay? Because it's kind of controlled still by the English. From whence he, Richard, intercepted, did return. When Richard returned to England, Henry Bolingbroke already had the support of everybody. And it was almost like he was returning to conquered soil. And when he did return, I mean, he pretty much sees the lay of the land and says, so what do you want from me, Henry? And Henry essentially says, for you to abdicate, okay? From whence he intercepted did return to be deposed and shortly murdered. Nothing in the play in Richard II, and I don't think really anything in history suggests that Henry Bolingbroke wanted Richard killed. Okay? That's something undertaken by a guard. Definitely that way, at least within the play. Worcester, and for whose death we in the world's wide mouth live scandalized and foully spoken of. World's wide mouth? You could almost say the World Wide Web. The opinion of the world. He says, we are scandalized and foully spoken of. Why? Because they were involved in that whole process. So, Hotspur. Notice, he's calmed down a little bit. Wait, did I hear you right? King Richard proclaimed my brother Edmund Mortimer heir to the crown? He did. I heard it, his father says. Nay, then, I cannot blame his cousin king that wished him on the barren mountain starve. Another, oh, okay. Now I understand why Henry is acting this way. This way, wanting Mortimer to die on the mountains. Why? Because Mortimer is a claimant to the throne. One thing that comes throughout, not Shakespeare's, well, it does come throughout Shakespeare's English history, but in real English history is when there is someone on the throne and there is another claimant to it, someone's going to get murdered. You know, I mentioned Richard III at the end of the Henry VI plays. Henry VI, I think it's Henry VI, had two sons. 12 and 9, something like that, who mysteriously, according to Shakespeare's Richard III, died in the Tower of London. Their bodies were never found. It was thought possibly in the 1930s that they were found because 2 skeletons were found of young boys, but it's not conclusively proven that they were there. I had a book from Amazon, but I returned it. It's supposedly the solution to what happened to the Lost Prince. I may have to go back and buy it and read it anyways. By a literary scholar and kind of investigator, so to speak, that she says she found the 2 lost princes. According to Shakespeare's play, Richard III had them killed. Why? Because both of them could claim the throne. Elder brother and then younger brother. Richard III is like cousin in line. Okay? So, I cannot then blame his cousin king that wished him on the barren mountain starve. But shall it be that you that set the crown upon the head of this forgetful man, why is he called forgetful? Yeah, because he's forgetting their allegiance to him. And for his sake wear the detested blot of murderous subordination. Shall it be that you a world of curses undergo, being the agents or base second means, the cords, the ladder, or the hangman rather? Is it right that you guys should suffer for having been the ones who helped him to the throne? Pardon me that I descend so low to show the line in the predicament wherein you range under this subtle king. Shall it for shame be spoken in these days, or Philip chronicles in time to come, that men of your nobility and power did gauge them both in an unjust behalf? As both of you, God pardon it, have done. What's the unjust behalf? Henry IV. To put down Richard, that sweet, lovely rose, and plant this thorn, this canker, Bolingbroke. And shall it in more shame be further spoken that you were fooled, discarded, and shook off by him for whom these shames ye underwent? Notice what Henry hasn't done, by the way. What do tyrants often do to those who help them become tyrants? You kill them. Why? Because if they can make you tyrant, they can make someone else tyrant too. They can make themselves the tyrant. He says, no. Yet time serves wherein ye may redeem your banished honors and restore yourselves. Notice his theme. Restore your honor into the good thoughts of the world again. How? Revenge the jeering and disdained contempt of this proud king. Take him down. Who studies, this proud king, who studies day and night to answer all the debt he owes to you with the bloody payment of your deaths. Now, has anything in the play to this point suggested that Henry IV is plotting against them? No.
But they know how politics work.
Worcester, peace, cousin, say no more. And now I will unclasp a secret book, he says, and now I'm going to tell you some secret info. He's not literally talking about a book. Okay? So, Hotspur goes on, and Northumberland, talking to his brother, to Worcester, says, there's no reasoning with him when he's in this kind of mindset. You just got to let him get it all out. Imagination of some great exploit drives him beyond the bounds of patience. What does that mean? Imagination of some great exploit.
Grandiosity.
Some great deed he's going to perform. Why? To earn more honor. Okay? Hotspur keeps going on. Worcester, he apprehends a world of figures here. In other words, he's conjuring up. Like Theseus when he talks about how imagination bodies forth and everything. Well, in Hotspur's mind, he sees all these images. What are the images? They're like, in The Lord of the Rings, Samwise Gamgee, when he puts on the ring and looks into Mordor, he thinks, I'll be Sam the great gardener. I'll turn Mordor into a paradise, etc. Hotspur is seeing himself defeat Henry, restoring the kingship as it ought to be. Okay? Worcester starts to talk about the unclasped book, those same noble Scots that are your prisoners. Hotspur, I'll keep them all. By God, he's not going to have one of them. Stop. Those prisoners you shall keep. So Worcester tells him, keep them. And of course, hear you, cousin, a word. Shut up. All studies here, so Hotspur says, okay. I'll talk to you when you are better tempered to attend. Worcester's like, I give up. When you're calm, no. Okay? Northumberland, what a wasp-stung and impatient fool art thou to break into this woman's mood. What's he mean by woman's mood? Calm down. Yeah, it's exactly it. Hysterical. Hotspur, goes on and on again. Okay? So, towards the end of that scene, line 290 or so. Now let me back up. 277 or so, they say they're going to join up with Mortimer. Okay? And then picking up a little bit after that, 284, Worcester says the king will always think him in our debt. The king will always think that he is in our debt for his kingship. Meaning, what? Does he mean think him in our debt? No, he's got to repay them? No. Meaning, they know how I got to be king, and they've got to be silenced. Okay? And we think ourselves unsatisfied till he hath found a time to pay us home. What does that mean? Found a time to pay us home. To kill us. Okay? What has Worcester just done? Do we know the king is thinking that? No, we don't. Might the king be thinking that? Yes, he might. Okay? But Worcester is, at the very least, projecting that onto the king. Why? Because Worcester's thinking what he would think if he were the king. In other words, this is telling us how Worcester would behave. He wouldn't trust anybody. Okay? That's going to come up later in the play in a big way. And see already how he doth begin to make us strangers to the looks of love. That is, notice how he's distanced himself from us. Hotspur, oh, yeah. We'll be revenged. Farewell, cousin. When time is ripe, which will be suddenly, that is, it's coming soon, I'll steal to Glendower and Lord Mortimer, where you and Douglas and our powers at once, as I will fashion it, shall happily meet. So, Worcester is going to go to Glendower and Mortimer, and Hotspur will meet them with the Douglas and his Hotspur's army to bear our fortunes in our own strong arms, to bear, to bring, to carry our fortunes. In other words, he's saying he's not going to let Lady Fortune do what? Spin her little wheel and determine the outcome. He's saying, we're going to do what? We're going to make our fortunes. We will control. Okay? So, they leave. So, Act 1, Scene 1 was a serious scene, right? Act 1, Scene 2, comedic scene. We get introduced to Hal and Falstaff and such. Act 1, Scene 3, pretty serious scene. Act 2, Scene 1, okay? We have a carrier come in with a lantern, with Gad's Hill and others. Not going to talk any more about that. Go to Act 2, Scene 2. We have the planning of the Gad's Hill robbery and the robbery itself. Okay? And it's a comedic scene. How many people sat on Falstaff? One or two, not many. Okay? We're going to come back to that in another scene. The prince and Pawns are the ones who sat on Falstaff and the others. They steal Falstaff's bag and things like that. And the prince gets the, not quite final, but pretty much the final scene of Act 2, Scene 2. And then we go to Act 2, Scene 3. So again, Act 2, Scene 2, how do we see Hal? He's a robber. He's a highway thief. Okay, he's doing it against his friends. He's not actually robbing, some middle-class person. Act 2, Scene 2, Act 2, Scene 3. We see Hotspur come in. And we're going to see in this scene Hotspur and his wife, Lady Percy. So Hotspur comes in reading a letter. But for mine own part, my lord, I could be well contented to be there in respect of the love I bear your house. Hotspur comments about that, then he reads some more of the letter. The purpose that you undertake is dangerous to take a cold, to sleep, to drink, blah, blah, blah. Okay? His wife comes in. Her name is Kate. Shakespeare likes that name, Kate, by the way. Kate comes in, and he says, I've got to leave. Oh, my good lord, why are you thus alone? For what offense have I this fortnight been a banished woman from my Aries bed? Okay? We've not slept together. He's busy. She asked him, what takes you from me, etc.? That takes from thee thy stomach pleasure and thy golden sleep. Why dost thou bend thine eyes upon the earth and start so often when thou sittst alone? So his eyes are on the ground when he walks around, and when he's sitting by himself, she says, and start so often when thou sittst alone. What does that mean, start? Jump, twitch, looking around, like he hears a noise? He's on edge. His eyes are on the ground when he walks around. Why? Same reason Hamlet's eyes are when we get to Hamlet. Up here, he's somewhere else. He is preoccupied. He's thinking of things. What's he thinking about? You know, the little things. Deposing the king. It's like Princess Bride. You know, I've got my wedding to plan, Gilder to invade, Gilder to blame for my wife's. So, she goes on and talks about things like war and melancholy and such. And it's like Hotspur doesn't hear a word she says. I mean, she gets a long speech. Line 40 to 62. Line 40 to 62 or so. Hotspur, what ho? He calls to someone. The servant comes in. Okay? He gives the servant some orders. He goes out. But hear you, my lord? Lady Percy says, what sayest thou? Whoosh, completely oblivious. Not a sign of a good marriage. What sayest thou, my lady? What carries you away? Why, my horse, my horse. Being a smartass. Oh, you mad-headed ape. She says, Hotspur, so far afoot I shall be weary, love. Come, answer. What's going on? And he says, away, away, you let me back up. Come, come, you periquito, answer me. And you got a gloss down there, periquito, a little parrot. Directly under this question that I ask, in faith, I'll break thy little finger, Harry, and if thou wilt not tell me all things true. If you don't tell me the truth, I don't think she literally means she'll break his little finger, but who knows? He says, away, away, you trifler. Sir, why that look?
She obviously is putting in a lot of emotional effort to ask about where his head's at, how can I help? And he says, you're just being meddling and annoying. Like, chill.
You're a little trifle. I mean, he called the periquito. It's a term of endearment, like honey. But the way he goes on, it's like she's like a pretty little bird. She just helps beautify his home. Okay. Love, I love thee not. I care not for thee, Kate. This is no world to play with mammets and to tilt with lips. What's he really mean? Does Hotspur not love his wife? No, he does. But he's saying, now, at this moment in time, it's not a time for love. It's not a time for romance. It's a time for what? To deal with the problem at hand. Okay? We must have bloody noses and cracked crowns and pass them current too. God's be my horse. What did you say, Kate? What would you have? What do you want from me? Do you not love me? Do you not indeed? Okay, well then don't. For since you love me not, I will not love myself. Ooh. What does that introduce? We could become a tragedy. If you're not going to love me, then tell me if you speak in jest or so. Come, will you see me ride? And when I am a horseback, I will swear to love thee infinitely. But hark you, Kate, I must not have you henceforth question me whither I go, nor reason whereabout. Whither I must, and to conclude this evening, must I leave you. Gentle, Kate, I know you wise, but no farther wise than Harry Percy's wife. Constant you are, but yet a woman. And for secrecy, no lady closer. What's he mean? No woman can better keep a secret than you. For I well believe that thou wilt not utter what thou dost not know. He can't tell her what he's about. Why? Is it because she's a woman? Possibly. What is the real reason? Because if she's captured and tortured, she can't reveal what she doesn't know. That's what he's really getting at. And so far will I trust thee. In other words, if you don't know anything, then I can trust you implicitly. Now, the flip side of that is, yeah, but if she is captured and tortured, she dies for no reason. Well, yeah, it sucks. Sucks to be the loved one of someone who's wanted for, information, so to speak. She says, so far, that's how far you trust me? He says, not an inch further. But hark you, Kate, whither I go, thither shall you go too. He says, today will I set forth, tomorrow you. What's he mean? I'll send for you. That's one way of reading it. You could read it in another way, a metaphorical way. Where I go, my death, you'll go there too, eventually. I mean, this is pretty bleak stuff. Why? He knows what he's doing. He's setting out against the king. Okay? Act 2. So, pretty serious stuff there. Act 2, Scene 4. We get a clown scene, or comedic scene, with the prince and pawns, and they talk about, the Gads Hill robbery. And we're going to see Falstaff come in, and they talk about the robbery. And what does Falstaff say? He was set upon by several, and eventually it becomes a score or more. 16 at least. He says around 170 or so. Then he goes on later and says even more. Long scene. And I want to see where I can pick up. Because I usually skip most of this. With beginning around lines 369 or so. Now, let me back up. 325. Falstaff says, there's news abroad that Percy has aligned with Glendower. Okay. And then he says 337. Owen the same, Owen Glendower. His son-in-law Mortimer, old Northumberland, that's the Earl of Northumberland, that's not Hotspur, he's Hotspur's father. That sprightly Scot of Scots, the Douglas, that runs a horseback up a hill perpendicular. See, normally when you go uphill, you lean forward in the horse, but Douglas is so big and brawny, he's like a tree moving up a hill, okay? And we're going to be told that line 369, Hal has got to go see his father tomorrow. And Falstaff says, well, thou wilt be horribly chided tomorrow when thou comest to thy father. If thou love me, practice an answer. So, let's get you prepared for your audience with the king. Because bear in mind, yes, Henry IV is Hal's father, but first and foremost, he's the king. That boundary never gets broken, okay? So, Prince, okay, you pretend to be my father and examine me upon the particulars of my life, meaning question me about how I spend my days. Falstaff, shall I? Content. Oh, cool. This chair shall be my state. So, Falstaff sits on his throne, and Falstaff should be, because of his description in the play, extremely obese. Hair unkempt, teeth horrible, unshaven, etc. When I saw this in, what year was that? 2013 at the National Theatre in London, Michael Gambon, who played Dumbledore in the later Harry Potter movies, played Falstaff, was really good. I mean, he had a fat suit and everything. And the guy who played Argus Filch was Henry IV. Just superb. Absolutely superb. And Hal was played by a guy who was really young at the time, and now he's a big star. He was in Sense and Sensibility, Matthew McFadden. He was pretty, 11 years ago, he was fairly unknown then. Really, really good. And I was supposed to be way in the back, and they moved me up to the front, literally front row seats. And Michael Gambon, as Falstaff, is literally spitting out his lines. And, we're sitting here wiping stuff off. But it was a fantastic production. One of the best I've seen. So, Falstaff says, let's see where he picks up. Harry, I do not only marvel where thou spendest thy time, this is line 394 and following, but also how thou art accompanied. That is, who you spend it with. For though the chamomile, the more it is trodden on, the faster it grows, yet youth, the more it is wasted, the sooner it wears. That is, the more you waste out your youth, the older you become. That thou art my son, I have partly thy mother's word, partly my own opinion, but chiefly a villainous trick of thine eye, and a foolish hanging of thy nether lip that doth warrant me. In other words, your mother told me that you're my son. He says, but there's a look about your face that also tells me you bear resemblance to me. If then thou be son to me, here lies the point. Why being son to me art thou so pointed at? Meaning, why am I reading about you in the New York Post all the time? Why are you on the front of the National Enquirer? Why does everybody talk about you? Shall the blessed Son of Heaven prove a mitcher and eat blackberries? A question not to be asked. Shall the Son of England prove a thief and take purses? You may not remember, but prior to Meghan Markle, a few years prior to that, what was Harry's reputation? Prince Harry's. Oh, pictures, video, stripper parties at Vegas, everything. Okay? How? The only difference is he wasn't William. What was William's reputation? He's pretty straight-laced. He was pretty together, so to speak. Okay? There's a thing, Harry, which thou hast often heard of, and it is known to many our land by the name of pitch. What's pitch? Tar. This pitch, as ancient writers do report, doth defile. So doth the company thou keepest. Because pitch, tar, you cut down, when I have to cut down a pine tree or something, I get the tar all over my hands. It doesn't wash off easily. It takes days sometimes. He's saying the people you keep company with are like pitch. For now, Harry, I do not speak to thee in drink, but in tears, not in pleasure, but in passion, not in words only, but in woes. And yet there is a virtuous man whom I've often noted in thy company, but I don't know his name. Describe him, Hal says. A goodly, portly man. That is a stout man, in faith, and a corpulent, of a cheerful look, pleasing eye, most notable carriage, some 50 or so, maybe inclining to 80. Oh, his name is Falstaff. If that a man should be lewdly given, he deceiveth me. For Harry, I see virtue in his looks. If then the tree may be known by the fruit as the fruit by the tree, then peremptorily I speak it, there is virtue in that Falstaff, okay? So, where have you been the last month? What's he mean? I haven't seen you for a month. Now, Falstaff, unbeknownst to him, is getting at something key in this play, because the king is going to ask almost that exact same question. Prince, do you speak like a king? Let's switch places. You pretend to be me and I'll be my father. Depose me? Ouch. Because what did the king do? He deposed the previous king. So what does Falstaff just kind of, very subtly said? Oh, you're going to be like your father. You're going to depose me. It comes later in the play. Depose me? If thou dost it half so much gravely, so majestically, both in word and matter, hang me up by the heels for a rabbit sucker or a poulterer's error. So, the prince sets down. Falstaff, here I stand, judge my masters. Here I stand. That supposedly is what Martin Luther said. We'll talk about Luther when we get to Hamlet. We'll talk more about Luther. I already talked about it in first class. About what Martin Luther said when he was called to the Diet of Worms. And all these books and everything he had written, he said, recant. He was told to recant. And he said, I can't. Here I stand. I can do no other. So Falstaff kind of echoes that. Harry, whence come you? Where are you coming from? My noble lord, from Eastcheap. Eastcheap, Cheap Street, main thoroughfare in London at the time, okay? At that time, populated largely by whorehouses, okay? Cheap doesn't mean whores. Cheap, like when we use the word something is cheap, like this bottle is cheap, cheap means product. Old English is what it comes from. Just means goods. It's the street where you would go to do your shopping, all right? Food, clothing, etc. Eastcheap is the eastern part of that street. So he says, I come from there. But at Shakespeare's day, that's where the hookers plied their wares. My noble lord from Eastcheap, the complaints I hear of thee are grievous. Sblood, God's blood. My lord, they are false. I'll tickle ye for a young prince. Swearest thou, ungracious boy? Swearest thou? You swearing by God's blood? Ungracious boy. He says ungracious, not only meaning impolite, ungracious meaning without grace. Why? Because only someone without grace would swear by God's blood. In other words, someone damned. It's a theological issue. Henceforth ne'er look on me. Thou art violently carried away from grace. There is a devil haunts thee in the likeness of an old fat man. Okay, this is Hal, pretending to be king, speaking to Falstaff, pretending to be Hal. A ton of man is thy companion. Why dost thou converse with that trunk of humors, that bolting hutch of beastliness, that swollen parcel of dropsies, that huge bombard of sack? Sack is cheap wine. Go to the liquor store today, buy a box of wine, okay? That stuffed cloak bag of guts, that roasted Manning tree ox with the pudding in his belly, that reverend capitalized vice, a character in medieval morality plays, whose purpose is to draw others into sin, that gray iniquity, that father ruffian, that vanity in years. Wherein is he good but to taste sack and drink it? What is he good for?
Drinking wine.
Other than to get drunk. Wherein neat and cleanly, but to carve a capon, leg of meat, and eat it. Wherein cunning, but in craft. Craft doesn't mean like, being a woodworker, a skilled craft. He means craftiness, deceitfulness. Wherein crafty, but in villainy. Who planned the Gad's Hill robbery? Was it Hal? Hal turns the tables. Falstaff is in on it. Okay? It's Falstaff's kind of Falstaff's idea. Wherein villainous, but in all things, wherein worthy, but in nothing. Okay? I would your grace would take me with you. Who means your grace? In other words, I don't know who you're talking about. Pretending to be Hal. that villainous, abominable misleader of youth, Falstaff, that old, white, bearded Satan. Now, I don't know that Shakespeare knew the meaning of the name Satan. I wouldn't be surprised. What's it mean? It doesn't mean goat horned, goat footed tail, trident. It means adversary. That's all the name Satan means. So when Iran says death to the great Satan and death to the little Satan, Israel, they mean death to the great adversary. We never used that terminology, but we did the same thing with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. We did the same thing with Nazi Germany and Japan and such. I know that man. I know that. But to say I know more harm in him than in myself, or to say more than I know, he is old, the more the pity. We should pity the old. His white hairs do witness it, but that he is saving your reverence. A whore mess, I deny that. If to be old and merry be a sin, then many an old host that I know is damned. If to be fat be to be hated, well, then Pharaoh's lean kine are to be loved. And yet go back and look at that story. No, you don't want to be lean in that sense. No, my good Lord. This is where this little scene turns serious. Banish Peto. Banish Bardolph. Banish Pons. But for sweet Jack Falstaff, kind Jack Falstaff, true Jack Falstaff, valiant Jack Falstaff, and therefore more valiant being as he is old, Jack Falstaff, banish not him, thy Harry's company. Banish not him, thy Harry's company. He says it twice. Okay, this is Falstaff pretending to be Hal, begging the king, don't banish Falstaff. Banish plump Jack and banish all the world. He's kind of saying, in Jack Falstaff is all the world. Prince, I do what? I do banish Jack Falstaff as king, pretending to be king, and then I will. Well, Henry IV, Part 2, we're going to see King Hal banish Falstaff. Why? He has to come out from behind the clouds. The coming out from behind the clouds, happens in this play. Okay? He allows Falstaff to maintain false dignity in false honor at the end of this play. Okay? So, sheriff comes in and says that Hal is being called to the castle. The king wants him. Okay? So Hal goes. 3-1. Hotspur, Worcester, Mortimer, and Glendower enter. And we are in Wales, at Glendower's residence. Your gloss mentions Holinshed. This marker. This is Raphael Holinshed, okay, who wrote, I can't remember the exact title, who wrote a history of essentially England, Ireland, and I think it's England, Scotland, and Wales. It's a big, massive 3-volume book that Shakespeare relies on. It's the main source for his histories. Holinshed wrote this in the early 16th century, okay? And it's thought that Shakespeare probably had a copy. In Shakespeare's Last Will and Testament, by the way, he mentions no books, which is very interesting. We have other writers' Last Will and Testament, and they do have books that they leave to certain people. Shakespeare doesn't mention any library at all, which is one of the reasons the anti-Stratfordians, the people who say Shakespeare from Stratford wasn't the writer, it's one of the reasons they say, see, he couldn't have been Shakespeare, because Shakespeare had to have books. Anyways, so they entered, And let's see here. Glendower produces a map. We're going to kind of go through this scene somewhat quickly. Glendower produces a map and says, "Said good cousin Hotspur, line 7. For by that name, as oft as Lancaster doth speak of you, his cheek looks pale, and with a rising sigh he wisheth you in heaven." Who's Lancaster? This is Prince John, Duke of Lancaster, Hal's younger brother. Okay? And notice, Glendower tells us when Prince John speaks of Hotspur, how's he put it? His cheek looks pale. Like, he's afraid of Hotspur. Well, he is younger. Prince John's only in his early teens. Hal's in his late teens at this point. Okay? Hotspur, and you in hell as oft as he hears old Glendower spoke of. That is, he wishes you in hell. I cannot blame him. And so Glendower tells us something about himself. This is right out of Holinshed. At my nativity, the front of heaven was full of fiery shapes. The sky looked like it was on fire. Off of burning crescents, and at my birth, the frame and huge foundation of the earth shaked like a coward. There was an earthquake. Earthquakes in Shakespeare's day, those were omens. They portended something. Hotspur, notice. Why, so it would have done at the same season if your mother's cat had but kittened, though yourself had never been born. Okay? So what does Glendower mean when he says there was an earthquake the day I was born? The whole world quaked to see my birth. It shook at my coming greatness. How does Hal turn that on its head? The whole world would have done that, he says, if your mother's cat gave birth to kittens. Hal's saying it's a simple natural occurrence. It would have happened nonetheless. Hal's saying there aren't portents. There aren't omens. Glendower, I say the earth did shake when I was born, and I say the earth was not of my mind, if you suppose as fearing you it shook. Okay. These guys are supposed to be what? Allies. Should Hal be contradicting Glendower? Probably not. Bear in mind, he's also supposed to be a magician. The heavens were all on fire, and the earth did tremble. Oh, then the earth shook to see the heavens on fire, and not in fear of your nativity. Disease in nature oftentimes breaks forth in strange eruptions. Oft the teeming earth is with a kind of colic, pinched and vexed by the imprisoning of unruly wind within her womb, which for enlargement striving, shakes the old beldame earth and topples down steeples and moss-grown towers. What has he just said? Look how he sums it. At your birth, our grandam earth, having this distemperature, in passion shook. What did the earth do when Glendower was born? Use common, somewhat vulgar parlance. It farted. It broke wind. That's why he said the line there about, by the imprisoning of unruly wind. Glendower, cousin, of many men I do not bear these crossings. Most people would die for what you just said. Give me leave to tell you once again that at my birth the front of heaven was full of fiery shapes. The goats ran from the mountains. The herds were strangely clamorous to the frighted fields. These signs have marked me extraordinary. Now, those examples, by the way, of the herds and the goats and stuff, that could be an indication Shakespeare experienced an earthquake. Because that is often, I'm from California, that is often what animals do prior to an earthquake. Dogs will howl and start barking. Birds will go out of the trees before an earthquake. Somehow they know, okay? These signs have marked me extraordinary in all the courses of my life to show I am not in the role of common men. Where is he living, Clipton with the sea that chides the banks of England, Scotland, Wales, which calls me pupil, or hath read to me, and bring him out that is but woman's son, can trace me, blah, blah. Hotspur, I think there's no man speaks better Welsh. Out of dinner. You speak good Welsh, I'm hungry. That's what Hotspur's doing with everything Glendower has just said. Mortimer, peace, cousin Percy. Keep in mind, Mortimer is Glendower's son-in-law now. You'll make him mad. I can call spirits from the vent. So now Glendower is doing what? He's doing exactly what Hotspur did when we first saw Hotspur. He's on a roll. He's gotten into a theme. His theme is my greatness, you know. So can I, so can any man. But will they come when you call them? Come on, Glendower, let's see it. I can teach you, cousin, to command the devil, and I can teach thee to shame the devil. But tell the truth. Tell the truth and shame the devil. If thou have power to raise him, bring him. And I'll be sworn I have power to shame him hence. Mortimer, shh, stop. Okay? 3 times hath Henry Bolingbroke made head against my power. Thrice from the banks of Wye, sandy bottom Severn, have I sent him bootless home and weather-beaten back. Okay? So, they finally get to talking about the map that Glendower brought up. And what do we see? What are they going to do? The Archdeacon hath divided it into 3 limits very equally. England from Trent and Severn, and so if we had a map, we could get the rivers and see how it divides, okay? So all this land is going to go to Owen Glendower. He says, and all this land is going to go to you, cousin, from Trent. And all this land is going to go to Percy, and my Lord of Worcester will set forth, etc., etc. What are they already doing? They're dividing up the kingdom. What do they have to do first? You got to overthrow the king. Okay? Counting your, chickens before they hatch, so to speak. And what does Hotspur immediately notice? Well, I don't have as much as you guys. I want more. Methinks my mighty Northumberland in quantity equals not one of yours. Okay? He says, I want more. Glendower, no, you can't. Mortimer, yeah. So they go, notice what we see. These allies, there are what? If you look at that map that they divide up, notice they divide it up. So what are there between the 3 sections? Boundaries, fissures. What's the problem with fissures? They open up, they create gaps. In this so-called allyship, there are fissures, there are fault lines between them, okay? We'll stop there. We'll pick up with Act 3, scene, scene 1 still. Man, we've got to finish this. On Tuesday, we've got to try and finish it because we are so far behind. Very briefly, around line 173, and then we'll get into Act 4, and probably, Act 4 is not that long, and Act 5 goes quickly. So, we'll try to finish it. I don't think I can. Nope, can't send a quiz yet to complete As You Like It, because I still have no access to any of MTSU's stuff. You have the exam. It's due a week from today, beginning of class. If I do get access, I will post a real easy quiz over the second half of As You Like It. All right, and I need to do one over Henry IV. I'll do that for later next week. Have a good weekend, have a good day.
Where's this tower being